My brother smirked across the dinner table and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You'll always be a renter. People like you don't buy houses." The laughter stung, but I didn't argue. I just sat there quiet, my hand brushing the folder in my bag, the one holding a signed deed he knew nothing about. 1 week later, the smirk was gone. Before I dive into this story, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Your stories remind me I'm not alone. Growing up, there was always a spotlight in my family, and it never landed on me. My brother Ethan was the golden child from the very beginning. He had the straight A report cards taped proudly to the fridge, the varsity jacket hung in the hallway, the applause at every graduation. I was the quiet one, the one who blended into the background. While he basked in praise, I was expected to clap along. It didn't stop when we became adults. Ethan landed a cushy job in finance, bought a shiny SUV, and moved into a sprawling suburban house that became the family's new pride and joy. Every holiday, every barbecue, every birthday, my parents would gush over his mortgage payments and landscaping, like they were achievements worthy of a medal. Meanwhile, I rented a modest apartment, worked long hours at my marketing job, and side hustled whenever I could. "Don't worry," Emma's fine mom would say whenever someone asked about me, but her smile always carried that unspoken message I wasn't Ethan. The truth was, I never cared about impressing them with big purchases or flashy cars. What I cared about was independence. I clipped coupons, packed lunches, skipped nights out, and quietly saved every spare dollar. My coworkers teased me for drinking instant coffee instead of Starbucks, but I knew what I was working toward. Still, in my family's eyes, I was invisible. At Sunday dinners, Ethan would ask with that smug grin, "So Emma, how's the shoebox apartment? Still paying someone else's mortgage?" The table would laugh, my parents trying to soften it with awkward chuckles, but no one ever told him to stop. I learned to swallow the humiliation and keep my head down. What they didn't see were the late nights I spent crunching numbers, scrolling real estate listings, and building a future no one believed I could have. They assumed I was stuck where I'd always been, renting struggling second place, but the deed in my bag said otherwise. The jokes didn't stop. If anything, they became sharper. At every family dinner, Ethan found a new way to remind me I didn't measure up. "How's life in that shoebox?" he'd say, his voice dripping with false innocence. Or, "Don't forget to renew your lease before your landlord kicks you out." Each jab landed like a pinprick, small but constant, wearing me down. Mom would sigh and murmur, "Ethan," but her voice never had any real weight. Dad just chuckled sometimes, even adding, "Your brother's just teasing. Don't be so sensitive." Teasing. That was their word for it. But to me, it was public humiliation dressed up as family banter. I learned to control my expression, to hold my fork steady, even when my hands wanted to shake. I told myself, stay quiet, stay calm. But inside, I was keeping score. What they didn't know was that outside those dinners, my life looked very different from the picture Ethan painted. I worked 2 jobs for years, skipped vacations, wore the same winter coat for 5 seasons straight. I saved until it hurt every dollar carefully tucked away. And finally, months ago, the impossible had happened. I found a house, a small place on the edge of town with creaky hardwood floors and sunlight spilling across the porch every morning. I signed the papers with my realtor in a quiet office on a Tuesday afternoon. She handed me the keys, smiled, and said, "Congratulations, homeowner." That moment should have been shared with family, but I knew better. If I told them, then Ethan would have found a way to twist it to make it small. So I kept it to myself, holding the secret close. Then came the night that changed everything. We were gathered at the table for Dad's birthday. The room buzzed with conversation glasses, clinking, the smell of roast chicken filling the air. I had almost convinced myself it would be an ordinary dinner. But Ethan never let an opportunity pass. He leaned back, smirked, and said it like a declaration. "You'll always be a renter, Emma. People like you don't buy houses." The laughter that followed was louder than usual, crueler somehow. My parents smiled tightly as if embarrassed, but unwilling to challenge him. Even my Aunt Caroline looked down at her plate, uncomfortable. Something inside me hardened. For years I had endured the jokes, the dismissals, the constant reminder that I wasn't enough. But this time was different. because sitting at that table listening to their laughter, I wasn't powerless. The deed was already signed. The house was already mine. The folder was in my bag tucked between a notebook and my wallet. I didn't say anything that night. I let Ethan have his moment, let the laughter ripple and fade. But as I gathered my coat and slipped the strap of my bag over my shoulder, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay invisible anymore. The next dinner, I wouldn't leave the room in silence. The next time Ethan smirked, I would be ready. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just wipe the smirk off his face, it would erase it forever. That night, after Dad's birthday dinner, I went home and sat in the quiet of my apartment. The laughter from the table replayed in my head like an echo I couldn't shut off. My brother's smirk, my parents' silence, the way everyone just let it happen as though it was acceptable for me to be humiliated over and over again. For a moment, the old part of me wanted to cry, to let the weight of years of ridicule crush me. But then my eyes landed on the small silver key sitting on my kitchen counter, the key to my new house. I picked it up, felt the cool metal press into my palm, and remembered exactly why I had fought so hard for it. It hadn't been easy. There were nights I came home so tired from my second job, I fell asleep at the kitchen table with a half-finished sandwich beside me. Winters when the apartment's heater rattled and wheezed, but I refused to call the landlord because every extra dollar needed to go into savings. Friends invited me to vacations, dinners, even weekend trips. I declined them all. My life was built on sacrifice, on discipline no one else ever saw. And in the end, it had paid off. That little house wasn't just a roof over my head, it was proof. Proof that their words about me being just a renter were nothing but noise. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder that held the deed, smooth official with my name in bold print. I traced the letters with my finger, letting the reality sink in. They thought they knew me, thought they had me boxed in forever as the struggling sibling. But this paper was my weapon, sharp and undeniable. The plan started to form in my mind. I wouldn't shout or argue. That had never worked. I would wait until the next family dinner, until Ethan opened his mouth again to tear me down. And then instead of shrinking, I would let the truth speak for itself. I practiced it in my head, how I would sit calmly, how I'd reach into my bag without a word, how I'd slide the folder across the table. I pictured the smirk sliding off Ethan's face, the silence falling over the room, the stunned looks as they realized the one they dismissed had been building something all along. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not fear, control. The days leading up to that dinner were different. I walked into work lighter, my head held higher. When Ethan's texts came through, little jabs about my apartment or my cheap car, I didn't even flinch, because I knew something he didn't. I knew the punchline to a joke he hadn't realized was over. On the morning of the dinner, I slipped the folder into my bag and zipped it shut with care. My hands didn't tremble this time. I wasn't carrying shame anymore. I was carrying proof. And as I locked my apartment door and headed out, I smiled to myself. Tonight, the quiet sister wasn't going to stay quiet. Tonight, the tables were going to turn. The dining room buzzed with the usual chatter, clinking glasses, the scrape of forks, the faint sound of a football game on the TV in the next room. The table was crowded, plates piled high, candles flickering. It was the kind of scene families romanticize, but for me, it was always a stage for Ethan's show. He didn't wait long to deliver his opening line. "So, Emma," he said, cutting into his steak, "how's life in the shoebox? Rent go up again. You know, you could have saved yourself a lot of money if you'd just married someone with a house." The table laughed. My mother shook her head, muttering, "Ethan," but there was no real bite in her tone. My father chuckled, stabbing at his potatoes. Aunt Caroline pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. I set my fork down carefully, the clink louder than I intended. My heart beat steady in my chest, not frantic, not panicked, just steady. The folder in my bag seemed to hum with weight, like it was alive. Still nothing to say. Ethan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Figures. You've always been the quiet one. Some people just aren't cut out for ownership, and that's fine, Emma. Not everyone gets to win." I looked up at him, met his eyes, and finally spoke. My voice was calm, almost soft. "You're right, Ethan. Not everyone gets to win." Then I reached into my bag. The room fell quiet as I pulled out the folder, placed it on the table, and slid it across the linen toward him. "You might want to take a look before you finish that thought." He frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption, and flipped it open. At first, he smirked, as if expecting a lease renewal or some meaningless paperwork. But then his eyes caught the bold black letters, "Deed of Ownership." His smirk collapsed. "What is this?" he muttered, scanning the page. "It's my house," I said simply. "Closed last month. Keys in my bag." The silence around the table was electric. Aunt Caroline gasped, leaning forward to read. My mother blinked rapidly as if trying to process. My father set down his fork, his jaw tightening. Ethan's face flushed red. You bought a house, Yes, I answered steady, and I didn't need to tear anyone down to do it. The air shifted. For once, no one laughed. Even the sound from the TV in the other room felt distant. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Emma." "Why didn't you tell us?" I shrugged. Because every time I tried to share anything, it turned into a punchline. The words landed heavy. Even Dad looked away ashamed. Ethan tried to recover, his voice sharp. "So what? One little house doesn't mean you're successful. You probably overpaid. Probably some dump." I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, as if on cue, my phone buzzed on the table. The caller ID lit up Realtor, Sarah. I answered on speaker. "Hi, Emma," Sarah's professional voice rang out. "Just confirming everything's squared away with the utility transfers for your property. Congratulations again on your new home." The timing was perfect. I thanked her, ended the call, and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The room was silent again, all eyes on me. Ethan's hands clenched into fists on the tablecloth. His smirk was gone, replaced with something I had never seen before: fear. Not of me, but of what I represented. Proof that he wasn't untouchable. Proof that his version of me had been a lie. Aunt Caroline broke the silence first. "Emma? That's incredible. I'm proud of you." Her words cracked the tension. My mother still looked stunned. My father grim, but no one dared laugh this time. Ethan shoved back his chair so hard it scraped against the hardwood. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, storming out of the dining room. The front door slammed. The echoes faded, leaving only the soft clink of a spoon against a coffee cup. I stayed seated, calm, my hands folded neatly in my lap. For once, I wasn't invisible. For once, the room wasn't laughing at me. And the best part, I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged for respect. I'd simply let the truth sit there, undeniable, in black and white. The following week, I stood on the porch of my new house, keys cool in my hand. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with maple trees that swayed in the late afternoon breeze. I turned the lock, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and polished wood. Sunlight poured through the wide front windows, spilling across the floorboards I'd dreamed about for years. I set my bag down and just stood there, letting the silence wrap around me. No laughter at my expense, no voices telling me I wasn't enough, just peace. I wandered from room to room, running my fingers along the walls, picturing furniture plants, the life I would build here. Every corner whispered back a reminder: this wasn't rented, this wasn't borrowed, this was mine. My phone buzzed again, Ethan's name flashing across the screen. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to answer. I let it ring until it stopped, slid the phone into my pocket, and opened the back door to the small yard. The grass was uneven, a little wild, but it was beautiful to me. I realized then that the real victory wasn't humiliating Ethan or proving my parents wrong. It was standing here in this space I had earned with sacrifice and persistence, knowing my worth had never depended on their approval. Ethan's smirk, my parents' silence, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the quiet strength that had carried me here step by step, dollar by dollar. I leaned against the doorframe, breathing in the scent of cut grass, and smiled to myself. For the first time, the laughter wasn't theirs. It was mine. Families can be brutal in ways strangers never could. They know exactly where to hit, and for years I let those hits land without fighting back. But sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or proving them wrong in the moment, it's building something undeniable and letting the truth speak for itself. I didn't embarrass my brother. He embarrassed himself when the papers hit the table. And in that silence, I realized something powerful: my worth was never theirs to define. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family or made to feel small by people who should have lifted you up, know this: you're not alone. Drop a comment and share your story, because I promise there are others who need to hear it. And if this story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. There are more stories coming that might just sound a little like yours.